Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om
Om
Namo
Namo
Bhagavate
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Iti havavasa jagati patir ishwarechaya dhiniveshita karmadhikaro.
इति हवावस जगत्तिपतिर् ईश्वरेच्छा निवेशितः कर्माधिकारो
Akhila jagat bandha dhvam sana paranubhavasya bhagavatadi.
अखिल जगत बंध
Tvam Sarna
ध्वंसन
Pranabhuvashaya
परानुभावस्य
Bhagavata
Purushasyanghri yugalanavarata dhyananubhavena parirandhita.
पुरुषस्याङ्घ्रि युगलानवरत ध्यानानुभावेन
Anubhavena
परिरन्धित
Adita.
कषायाशयो वदातोऽपि मानवर्धनो महतां महितलम् अनुशाशास
कषायाशयो वदतो
Adopi
अभिमानवर्धनो
Avardhano
महतां
Manadam Mahitam
महितलम् अनुशशास.
Anushashasha.
Yes, someone like to read?
Very good.
Yes, please.
Translation. Following the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Maharaj Priyavrata fully engaged in worldly affairs, yet he always thought of the lotus feet of the Lord, which are the cause of liberation from all material attachment. Although Priyavrata Maharaj was completely freed from all material contamination, he ruled the material world just to honor the orders of his superiors. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The words Manavardhano Mahatam, just to show honor to superiors, are very significant. Although Maharaj Priyavrata was already a liberated person and had no attraction for material things, he engaged himself fully in governmental affairs just to show respect to Lord Brahma. Arjun had also acted in the same way. Arjun had no desire to participate in political affairs or the fighting at Kurukshetra, but when ordered to do so by the Supreme Lord Krishna, he executed those duties very nicely. One who always thinks of the lotus feet of the Lord is certainly above all contamination of the material world, as stated in Bhagavad Gita. Yoginam api sarvesham madgate nantaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam samay yukta tamomata. Of all yogis, he who always abides in me with great faith, worshipping me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. Maharaj Priyavrata therefore was a liberated person and was among the highest of yogis. Yet superficially he became the emperor of the universe in accordance with the order of Lord Brahma. Showing respect to his superior in this way was another of his extraordinary qualifications, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 6.17.28. Narayana parasarve na kutaschana vipyati swarga pavarga narakeshva apitulyartha darshina. A devotee who is actually advanced is not afraid of anything, provided he has the opportunity to execute the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the proper explanation of why Priyavrata engaged in worldly affairs, although he was a liberated person. Also, only because of this principle does a Mahabhag, who has nothing to do with the material world, comes down to the second platform of devotional service to preach the glories of the Lord all over the world. Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. So, of all the yogis, he who abides in me with great faith, worshipping me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. So, Maharaj Priyavrata, so this is a great mystery. You know, why Maharaj Priyavrata accepted the instruction of Brahmaji, and then why is he still considered exalted? So, this is very much clear if we study the Bhagavad Gita, actually. In the 8th chapter, Krishna is saying, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu ma manusmarayudhya cha maya arpita mano buddhir maya veshasya asanshaya. So you'll be united with me. Mame veshasya. So you'll always be with me. You'll be always fixed with me. You'll attain me without doubt. Asanshaya, without any doubt. So Maharaj Priyavrata also, outwardly though he seemed to engage in activities of Maya, he is inwardly completely united with Krishna. So, so this instruction also that the activities that he was carrying out was also on behalf of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, there was no chance of him falling down. See, because he himself had no desire to do it. He was doing it as a desire of the Supreme, as an instruction from the Supreme. Now, of course, there may be some pleasure in it, but his heart was always attached to the Supreme. See, Krishna is Rasaraj. Aham sarvasya prabhava. Mattah sarvam pravartate. Everything is emanating from Krishna. And Krishna is Satchit Ananda. Satchit Ananda. So one who has already united with the Lord, he has already attained all the Ananda. He has attained bliss. So when we say that a pure devotee is not attracted to the material pleasures, what it means is that he has attained something higher than material pleasure. It doesn't mean that a devotee will derive no pleasure in material world. No, I mean, acharyas, if you see, for example, Srila Prabhupada used to like eating kachoris, or Srila Prabhupada used to like taking walks on the sea beach. So these kind of activities, they are definitely sources of pleasure. So it's not that a devotee is like completely bereft in this world and he has nothing, he's like completely dried up here. It's not like that. What it means is that the devotee has already obtained the fountainhead of all pleasure. He's obtained the lotus feet of Krishna. So for him, there is no question of falling down. For him, there is no question of being attracted to the lower sources of pleasure. He may still derive some pleasure, but he'll not be fixated on them at all. Because he knows his destination is, his final destination is Krishna, who is the source of all happiness. So there is no question of him sacrificing anything in this world at all. For example, if we see a child in a school, now the child in the school is always happy. He knows school is discipline and it's maybe studies are a bit boring also, but still he knows that at the end of school he's going home. But if the same school turns out to be an orphanage, then the child would be quite miserable. That's why we have so many stories and movies about orphans living in orphanages, because it's absolute misery. For a child, there is no pleasure in an orphanage. But for a child who has parents, who has a home, for him, the day school is a pleasure, because he knows that he has to undergo some discipline, but then at the end of it, he'll go back home. So a devotee may derive some pleasure in this material world, but he knows the highest pleasure is waiting for him already in the spiritual world. Therefore, a devotee does not fall down in the material world. A Kanishtadhikari, a Madhyamadhikari, or not a mature devotee will fall down because he really has no idea of spiritual world. He has some knowledge, but his knowledge of spiritual life is incomplete. Therefore, an immature devotee, a Madhyamadhikari or a Kanishtadhikari, is very much liable to falling down. So here Maharaj Priyavrat, because he was a pure devotee of the Lord, he took this as an instruction to serve the Lord, and he meditated constantly on Krishna. And he knew that all the pleasures and pains of this material world belong here only, and they are illusory. So therefore, one may temporarily suffer or one may temporarily enjoy. A pure devotee does not become fixed with them. He does not become attached to the pains and pleasures of this world. Hare Krishna. Yes, any questions or comments? Okay, continue, text 24. Asacha duhitaram prajapatir vishwakarmana upayeme barhishmatim.
Athacha duhiratam prajapatir vishwakarmana upayeme barhishmatim.
Nama tasyam uha vama atmajan samana shila guna karma rupa.
Nama tasyam
bhava atmajan samana shila guna karma rupa.
Viryodaran dasha bhavayam babhuva kanyam cha yaviyasim urjasvatim. Nama.
Viryodaran dasha bhavayam babhuva kanyam cha yaviyasim urjasvatim nama.
Did Prabhu?
Yes, please.
Hare Krishna. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Swami Prabhupada. Thereafter, Maharaj Priyavat married Parhismati, the daughter of the Prajapati named Vishwakarma. In her, he begot 10 sons equal to him in beauty, character, magnanimity, and other qualities. He also begot a daughter, the youngest of all, named Urjaswati. Purport. Maharaj Priyavata not only carried out the order of Lord Brahma by accepting the duties of government, but also married Parhismati, daughter of Vishwakarma, one of the Prajapatis. Since Maharaj Priyavat was fully trained in transcendental knowledge, he could have returned home and conducted the business of government as a brahmachari. Instead, however, when he returned to household life, he accepted a wife also. The principle is that when one becomes a grihastha, he must live perfectly in that order, which means he must live peacefully with a wife and children. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's first wife died, his mother requested him to marry for a second time. He was 20 years old and was going to take sannyasa at the age of 24. Yet, by the request of his mother, he married. As long as I'm in household life, he told his mother, I must have a wife. For household life does not mean staying in a house. Real household life means living in a house with a wife. 3 words in this verse are very significant. Hu, ha, vava. These words are used to express wonder. Priyavrata Maharaj had taken the vow of renunciation. But accepting a wife and begetting children have nothing to do with the path of renunciation. These are activities on the path of enjoyment. It was a source of great wonder, therefore, that Priyavrata Maharaj, who had followed the path of renunciation, had now accepted the path of enjoyment. Sometimes we are criticized because although I am a sannyasi, I have taken part in marriage ceremonies of my disciples. It must be explained, however, that since we have started a Krishna conscious society, and since a human society must also have ideal marriages, to correctly establish an ideal society, we must take part in marrying some of its members, although we have taken to the path of renunciation. This may be astonishing to persons who are not very interested in establishing Daiva Varnashrama, the transcendental system of 4 social orders and 4 spiritual orders. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakura wanted to re-establish Daiva Varnashrama. In Daiva Varnashrama, there cannot be an acknowledgement of social status according to birthright, because in Bhagavad Gita it is said that the determining considerations are guna and karma, one's qualities and work. It is this Daiva Varnashrama that should be established all over the world to continue a perfect society for Krishna consciousness. This may be astonishing to foolish critics, but it is one of the functions of Krishna conscious society. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. So, why did Priyavrat get married? So, he could have stayed as a brahmachari and governed like Bhishma Dev. He also stayed as a brahmachari. Of course, he was not the king, but still he stayed as an administrator, as Pitamaha. So, Priyavrat could have also done something similar. So, so point here that Srila Prabhupada makes is that to establish Varnashram, Priyavrat had to beget children also. It was not his responsibility to conduct this universe alone. It was also his responsibility to give birth to progeny who would conduct this universe after he had left. So just like his forefathers, the Prachetas, the great kings, Priyavrat, and the great kings had left before him, his brothers and his sons and grandsons had left. He was also supposed to, leave progeny behind to govern this universe. Therefore, he got married. Of course, activities of the great souls are not meant to be imitated. And we should also, not think after reading this purport or after reading this particular pastime of the devotees, we should not think that, getting married is something glorious. Actually, it's quite the contrary. By reading this, you should understand how dangerous the institution of marriage is, that we are describing in great wonder the story of Priyavrat. That Priyavrat could stay in the middle of Maya and still not be affected by it. Now that's great King Priyavrat. And still, Shukadeva Goswami, Maharaj Parikshit is asking as if this was a great fall down. So what to speak of ordinary people who have not even tried to get rid of Maya? Priyavrat was a sannyasi. So it is to be understood that even if it was to be a fall down for him, he would have still been able to come out of it. But for people who are not even trained in brahmacharya, how much more dangerous this situation is. So you see, Maharaj Priyavrat's pastime here is to indicate that he is establishing dharma in the face of great danger. And that great danger is the danger of Maya. That he very well runs a chance of falling down until he is reassured by Brahma himself that he will not fall down. He is unwilling to take that position. He takes that position only when he is assured that this change of ashram will not cause his fall down. So therefore, while one should stay at home with wife and children, it doesn't mean that one has to stay there or that it's a glorious situation. If you're swimming in the sea, you better come out fast, because sooner or later you are bound to get tired and then you will drown in the waves. So just like that, if one stays in Maya for too long, he is bound to fall down into animal kingdom. He is bound to drown into the ocean of Maya, bound to drown in the mode of ignorance and eventually descend into hellish animal life. So therefore we see that when people are ignoring Vedic injunctions, see, like we see also people want to get married. Like people say, oh, Prabhu, this Grihastha ashram is glorious. In Kali Yuga, brahmacharya, sannyas is forbidden. That doesn't mean that in Kali Yuga, Grihastha ashram is glorious. What it means that what was glorious is now gone. So Kali Yuga is like total darkness. Ajnana timirantasya. Very deepest of darkness of ignorance. So that means that in this age of Kali, the only means of deliverance is gone now. Sannyas. Now one has to take desperate shelter of the holy name. Grahe rahi Krishna nama nirantar laiva. So it's a dangerous situation. So when people love to talk about becoming grihasthas, they should also love to think about becoming vanaprasthas, because that's logical. Because people don't think like that, so there are so many extramarital affairs and so many things going on. Because it's not grihastha ashram, it is just glorified sex life. It is just sex life. There's nothing else to it. So therefore, we see that in this age of Kali, spiritual progress is very difficult indeed. So one should not think that Kali Yuga is glorious because holy name is available. What one should think is that the disease of Maya is so strong in Kali Yuga that the strongest of medicine is required. And as we see in our case, even that doesn't seem to be working so efficiently. So we really need to be desperate in our prayers to Krishna when we are chanting. This material world is an extremely dangerous place. So that's why this surprise is being expressed here as to why Priyavrat would even get married and have children, because that is such a dangerous thing to do. Why would he do something like this when he was already a sannyasi? Hare Krishna. Yes, any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, that means Yukta Vairagya is still a dangerous position, being in material world. Because anytime we can fall.
Of course. Whether you meet a snake in the jungle or you keep a pet snake, you are still living in danger. What is Yukta Vairagya really? Using everything in service of Krishna. Meaning that I will take whatever comes in the service of Krishna. Not that I'll keep on acquiring things and trying to concoct some ways of using them in Krishna's service.
Oh. So, okay, iske upar thoda sa, would you mind elaborating?
Give you an example. This came in, it's called Desire Tree actually. So some of our sannyasis were traveling from somewhere to somewhere. So they met Gaudiya sannyasis there. So this Maharaj was writing in Desire Tree that they started discussing about Yukta Vairagya. They were in the airport and they were discussing Yukta Vairagya. And this Gaudiya sannyasi, he just lifted his arm and he said, see, Now, Yukta Vairagya. See, I have this 100 rupee watch. It was some cheap digital watch that you get in every street corner in India. So he said, see, this is a 100 rupee watch. And it's okay, it'll work for maybe 1 year, 2 years, and it's gone. But it's 100 rupees. I just need to see the time. It doesn't matter whether it's cheap or expensive.
Mhm.
So the sannyasi was wearing a Rolex. So he became very ashamed of himself and he kept his arm behind him. Now you know what Rolex is. So you see, that is Yukta Vairagya. Not that, I buy an Apple iPhone and then I see, Prabhu, I'll join a Zoom class on Apple iPhone. That's
Yes.
nonsense. That's real nonsense because you're wasting
Mhm.
100,000 rupees to do something which could have been done with a 10,000 rupee phone.
Mm.
And if someone talks about the reliability, then also an Android phone will last you 4 to 5 years. Apple iPhone, after
Mhm.
3 years, they will, inject it with software and slow it.
Mhm.
Apple phones die after 3 to 5 years. Software has killed them. So this kind of excess, that is atyahar. Yukta Vairagya means whatever you have, just use that in service of Krishna. Don't acquire anything. Everything comes under the category of atyahar and prayas. Sometimes people say, Prabhu, I will do a master's and then doctorate and then people will listen to me. But that is nonsense. Because you don't really need to become a master of chemistry or physics or engineering to, have people hear you. If you're pure, people will listen. You don't need too many mundane degrees for that. Sometimes Srila Prabhupada would encourage, but that was for very specific reasons, only in some specific cases. Like Prabhupada encouraged a couple of his disciples to take doctorate degrees from American universities, but that was for very specific people only, for very specific reasons. Otherwise, Srila Prabhupada condemned the material education. So that is Yukta Vairagya. Not, I'm just enjoying my senses and then throwing something by the way of Krishna. That is nonsense.
So one other thing, Prabhuji. So it's not just whatever comes through Krishna is what we are supposed to use for the service of Krishna. So it's not just matter that comes through Krishna, it's emotions too that comes through Krishna.
Yes.
Right? So for example, fear. Or for example, okay, let's take an example of fear. How do you leverage that for service of Krishna?
Fear for the sake of Krishna. Yes, if you are fearful that you will fall into Maya, if you are fearful that one day you will
Something
forget
happened to
Krishna,
bhakti.
yeah, if you are fearful that something may happen to the movement, that's good fear. Like right now, we are faced with a crisis. I was in Mayapur, and I also saw that people are neglecting Prabhupada's books. So that's a great fear. I met some disciples of Prabhupada. They were also mentioning the same fear. We had the same fear that in a very few days, Srila Prabhupada would be almost entirely forgotten from this movement. So he'll just be a figurehead. Who's Prabhupada? Well, he's somebody, one of the acharyas. But what is his contribution? No one knows. No one studies Bhagavad Gita. No one studies Bhagavatam. So that is a fear. That is a good fear that you should have. So yes, but fear, there will be other materialistic fears also which will come by your way. So if you use those fears to take more shelter of Krishna, that is good.
More shelter. That's true.
Yeah. But don't create situations where you have to undergo fear.
Whatever comes naturally, then you should be praying more humbly.
Yes. The word used in Bhagavad Gita is yadrachaya. Whatever comes of its own accord. So that we have to realize. Whatever has already happened, that we use in the service of Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, why should we have this fear of losing Prabhupada's books? Because he himself has predicted that for the next 10,000 years, his books will be the guiding force for this. So when he himself, and such a pure devotee, has predicted this, how can he be wrong?
Well,
there may be ups and downs, but
well, these books should be distributed. These books should be there with people. Then they will be effective. They will be always effective. You keep a Bhagavad Gita even in a garbage can, somebody will pick it up and read and become a devotee. But there are not so pure devotees who are deliberately putting these books down. So that is a danger. That's always a danger. Srila Prabhupada himself explains. He himself says that there are big gaps in Acharya Parampara. It's not that every generation has one Acharya. No, there are big gaps. 5,000 years, just 32 Acharyas. So there are big gaps. So these books are there, but they are not being promoted. It's just Kirtan and Prasadam. Prasadam and Kirtan, that's it. And some concocted Grahasthashram. So in this way, the movement will not survive like this. Gaudiya Math was a powerful force. At the time when Srila Prabhupada left the Gaudiya Math had 64 temples. When Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur left this world, there were 64 temples. There were 64 Gaudiya Mathas. When Prabhupada left this world, there were 108 temples of ISKCON, out of which there were only 2 proper buildings, 3, Vrindavan, Mayapur and Bombay. The rest were all just centers. So when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur left, there were 64 temples. So you see, the situation is not very different. Without the philosophy, the movement will fall into concoctions. People will lose the perspective. Already so many unauthorized principles have been introduced. For example, this Gopashtami darshan of Radharani's feet. The Radharani's lotus feet are never meant for public display. Srila Prabhupada exclusively forbade it. But now new devotees don't even know this. Everyone goes for darshan of Radharani's lotus feet. No, that's a apasiddhant. Or eating non-Ekadashi prasadam during the Vishnu Murti's appearance days. So that is also disobedience of Prabhupada's instructions. So all these things, and especially men and women singing together in Kirtan Melas and all this. This is also unauthorized. So many things have taken place. So if books are not taken care of very meticulously, eventually people will forget who we are. We'll just slip into, there's this sampradaya. I don't know whether it's a bona fide sampradaya or not in Vrindavan. Hita Prem Sharan Sampradaya. So many of our devotees are now going there to take advice. Now, of course, that gentleman is quite saintly and he speaks quite wisely. But the point is, why our devotees need to go anywhere outside to find advice, which they could have easily found in the pages of introduction to Bhagavad Gita, not even Bhagavad Gita. So you see, that's the danger when people are neglecting the books. So don't think that
actually the books are being distributed. Only the thing is they are not being read.
Yeah, they are being distributed, but
there is so much of competition that we see in book distribution.
Yeah, with what mood are they being introduced? With what mood are they being distributed? They are just being sold. There is a difference between selling and distribution. So Srila Prabhupada had a very interesting letter in this regard. He said, I am not interested in you just selling the books. You should also study and know what you are selling. So take any book distributor and ask him some questions from the books he is selling. Nobody has any idea. Because I have done book distribution for 7-8 years, I know myself. Hardly any book distributor reads anything. I know one champion book distributor from Mayapur. He has built a big house there and he has like lots of money. But he doesn't read anything. He's very proud, he's very arrogant, he's very racist, everything. Very rich, but nonsense, complete nonsense fellow.
It's like it's become all about numbers of distribution. Like every day in the morning in the major temples, it is announced how many big books, how many small books have gone. See, that is the only focus.
Try to understand the principle behind this. Srila Prabhupada saw that Americans were very passionate, extremely passionate. So he engaged their passion in this kind of book distribution. Wild, like they were distributing 24 hours and all that. So he engaged them. But later on, he also expected our movement to mature. While book distribution is nice, we should also ensure that people who take these books become devotees. We should follow up. It's like this, where you have a small child. So the child takes a crayon or a chalk and he starts drawing on the walls. you feel happy. Your child is doing something and you encourage it. But now the child is 40 years old and he's still taking crayons and painting on the walls and doing nothing else, just making doodles on the wall. Now that would be silly. You'd probably think that the child is retarded or something. So after 50 years of Prabhupada's departure, if we are still selling books like crazy on the streets without studying them, without following up, then we are still like retarded. We are not grown. We are not gone ahead. Like in the country where I am staying, Finland, there are 1 million books that have been sold, but not a single devotee to show for it. So what is the use of this kind of book distribution? So this is just passionate activity. The child, when he doodles on the walls with crayons, it's a precursor. He should become an artist or he should become something going ahead. Not that he should be stuck to that only forever. So we are distributing books, we should make devotees, we should study those books. We should actually feel that we are distributing the mercy of Prabhupada, not that we are achieving the financial targets of our local bodies. Then that is nonsense. Because book distribution is not an Acharya Siddhant. It's not something given by Rupa Goswami that we should sell books. No. In fact, this knowledge is never sold. I mean, if we were living in the age of Madhavendra Puri, he would have gone out of his way to avoid giving any books at all. And this is the reason why they would do that. People take it cheaply.
Prabhuji, we cannot follow up everyone who buys a book from us on the street now. How will you do that?
At least try to follow up on someone. And arrange a proper session. You discuss Bhagavad Gita. Don't call him for some, some happy-go-lucky programs where no one talks Bhagavad Shastras. It shouldn't be some Bollywood kirtans and Bollywood feasting. No, that is all nonsense. It should be simple. Give some khichdi. Let him see what is spiritual life. You should not get some wrong impressions from us that, okay, these guys are like some Swaminarayan guys, super rich money bags or something. No, we should show him the simplicity. That's how most of us came to devotion. When we went to the temples, we saw the simplicity. We saw brahmachari life. It was mind-blowing to actually imagine that there were 30 brahmacharis living in an ashram right in the middle of Bombay. It was quite an interesting idea. But
sadly, that impression is already there. I mean, so many of my relatives and all, they say, ISKCON is a movement of rich people. That is already there in the minds of the people, looking at the opulent temples.
See, nothing wrong in that. Nothing wrong in being a rich or opulent movement. I mean, of course, we are followers of Krishna. Krishna, who is a master of Mahalakshmi. So certainly. But we should not be using that for our own aggrandizement, We shouldn't be just using that for our own fame and reputation or our own enjoyment. People should not think that,
people also feel intimidated by that.
Yes, they will.
I've seen some.
They will feel intimidated, and that's not good. So you see, the point here is that we must see. We can spend millions of dollars. We may make gold-plated temples, and we could serve 56-course meals. But we should give them proper knowledge. Without knowledge, all of this is zero. All the activities are zero if there is no knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so we continue. Text 25. Agni Dhredam Majihva Yajna Bahu Mahavira Hiranya Reto Ghrata Prishta. Savana Medha Tithi Viti Hotra Kavaya iti Sarva Evagni Namana.
Savana Medha Tithi Viti Hotra Kavaya iti Sarva Evagni Namana.
Sarva Evagni Namana.
Yeah.
Translation project. Can I read?
Yes, please.
The 10 sons of Maharaj Priyavrata were named Agnidhara, Idmajiba, Yagnabahu, Mahavira, Hiranyareta, Ghrataprastha, Savna, Medhatithi, Vitihotra, and Kavi. These are also the names of Agni, the fire god. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Text 26. Etesham kavir mahavira savana iti traya asanna urdhvaretasas ta atma
Isham Kavir Mahavira Swana Iti Traya Asan Urdhva Retasta Atma Vidyayam
vidyayam arbha bhavad arabhya krita parichaya param hansyam evashamam aptajan.
Vidyayam Arbha Bhavad Arbhya Karta Parichaya Paramhansyam Evashramam Abhajam. May I continue reading, Prabhuji?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Ji. Hare Krishna. Shri Prabhupada Ji ki jai. Translation. These three amongst these 10, namely Kavi, Mahavira, and Savna, lived in complete celibacy, thus trained in brahmachari life from the beginning of childhood. They were very conversant with the highest perfection known as Paramhansa Ashrama. Purport. The word Urdhavaretasa in this verse is very significant. Urdhvareta refers to one who can control sex life and who, instead of wasting semen by discharging it, can use this most important substance accumulated in the body to enrich the brain. One who can completely control sex life is able to work wonderfully with his brain, especially in remembering. Students who simply hear Vedic instructions once from their teacher could remember them verbatim without needing to read books, which therefore does not exist in former times. Another significant word is Arbha Bhavat, which means from very childhood. Another meaning is from being very affectionate to children. In other words, Paramhansa's life is dedicated for the benefit of others. Just as a father sacrifices many things out of affection for his son, great saintly person sacrifices all kind of bodily comforts for the benefit of human society. In this connection, there is a verse concerning the 6 Goswamis. Tyakatva Turnam Ashesha Mandala Pati Shrinim Sada Chavat Bhutva Dina Ganesha Kau Purnaya Kaupina Kanthasrito. Because of this compassion for the poor fallen souls, the 6 Goswamis gave up their exalted positions as ministers and took vows as mendicants, thus minimizing their bodily wants as far as possible. They each accepted only a loincloth and a begging bowl. Thus, they remained in Vrindavan to execute the orders of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by compiling and publishing various Vaishnava literatures. Very well. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Arbha Bhavat Urdhvaretasa. So, what does that mean, really? That by practicing strict celibacy, a person becomes Urdhvaretasha. So his ojas rises upwards, and he's able to, restrain his prana. And by doing that, one becomes a Shrutidhar. One is able to remember whatever one hears. So these 3 sons of Maharaj Priyavrat, Kavi, Mahavir, and Savana, they became Naishtika Brahmacharis, just like Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Naishtika Brahmacharis. Of course, you see, celibacy is not a qualification to attain the Supreme Lord, or rather, I would say it's not the only qualification to attain Supreme Lord. Certainly, if one remains in celibacy, it's easier for him to attain the Lord as compared to one who does not. And the reason is very simple. A celibate person has more time and more mental strength to focus on the Supreme, whereas a non-celibate person will not be able to do that. So the real purpose of celibacy is not that we become show-offs or that we can acquire more wealth or that we can acquire intelligence. Like sometimes we see these videos on YouTube. So instead of celibacy, now we can see the culture has degraded so much that we have this something called the so-called NoFap. Okay, that means like, no kind of artificial sex. So, and the biggest benefit they say is, hey, it helps you focus on your life. What life? Well, it could be just about any trash, studying some engineering, studying some mathematics, or studying some law or some subjects. But that's not the purpose. The real purpose is that we are able to focus. The purpose is that are we able to focus on the Supreme? That's the real purpose of life. So celibacy helps us focus completely on the Supreme. A Grihastha can also focus on the Supreme Lord, but he will have many distractions. And that's the reason why this acceptance of Grihastha ashram by Priyavrat was so surprising. So from the very childhood, if one is trained to be a brahmachari, it's very easy for him to become detached from home life later on in life. Because one day or the other, one has to lose everything. One will lose his family. One will lose his house. If one does it voluntarily as a sacrifice for the Supreme Lord, then that is extremely beneficial spiritually. As we see here also, sacrificing for the Supreme. Tyaktva turnam ashesha mandala pati shrenim sada tuchvat. Bhutva dina ganeshakau karunaya kaupina kanthashritau. So you see, living bare minimum life, the 6 Goswamis, just a loincloth and begging bowl. And they were following the orders of Mahaprabhu. And what were they doing actually? So this verse further continues. Gopi bhava rasamrita bati lahari kallola magnau muhur vande rupa sanatano raghu yugo shri jiva gopalakau. So they were always engaged in Gopi bhava rasamrita bati. They were always engaged in meditation on the Gopi bhava. Engaged in the loving service of loving sports of Radha and Krishna. So if one wants something, one has to sacrifice something. If you want to, say, for example, if you want to eat a vada pav, that will be like some 15-20 rupees. But if you want to eat a 5-star meal, it will be some 8,000-10,000 rupees. So it is always a difference. It could go up to 50,000 also if you go to some Michelin star restaurant. So that's how it is. So, so if one wants to attain the highest, that is Krishna, one has to pay the highest price. That's the simplest thing. One cannot sail on 2 boats. One cannot sail on material boat and the spiritual boat together. One has to leave Maya at some point. So it doesn't matter even if one is a Grihastha. But as a Grihastha also, one should first utilize all his opulences in the service of Krishna and then try to make plans to leave it as soon as possible. Hare Krishna. Yes, any questions or comments? Okay, now then we stop here today. Thank you very much, everyone. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Dandavat pranam ji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat pranam.
Pranam. Dandavat pranam. Hare Krishna. Thank you.